Okay, next.
Next.
So on the line now, we have Carl in California.
It's funny that you're talking about faith because my father just passed, and before he died, you don't really realize when your last conversation is going to be. And I didn't know that this would be the one.
Yeah.
But I asked him, he was a strong Christian, and I asked him that he'd been throwing up from esophageal cancer and he'd been really in bad shape. And I asked him, Dad, have you been praying and how's your faith? And he looked at me and kind of shook his head. And I just had this calling to pray with him. So I asked him if I could pray with him, and he said yes. And I'm not necessarily the best prayer in the world, but I prayed with him, and he held onto my hand so tightly and looked at me and with these eyes that I'll never forget. And it was like almost like God or the universe looking back at me.
Hmm.
And he said, "Thank you." And anyway, I just wanted to share that. I have a question, but that was maybe one of the most powerful moments of my life, besides my daughter being born.
Yeah.
My question is, I recently lost my father, and he was an actor and a huge reason I became a filmmaker and an artist. Now, as a husband and a father of a 2-year-old daughter, I'm stepping into a new role, both as a leader of my family and a leader of my work. My first feature film is actually coming together right as I'm grieving and all this loss and all this loss is happening at the same time with this amazing opportunity to tell a story. And how do I balance all of this grief, responsibility, health issues with my family, creative purpose, without losing my footing?
Okay, well, I'm going to address both of the things that you said. One of the things that I recommend to people when they're facing the reality of their aging parents is to count. So when I was 50 and my parents were 70, we lived a fair distance from them, and we spent some time together every year, and I counted the remaining times, and there was like 25 of them. And 25, that's not a very big number. And that was 25 if everything went well. And so one of the things you do have to understand is that you have less time for many things than you think. And you should be aware of that and grateful and awake and maximize the time and minimize the stupidity and unnecessary suffering, because you do not know when that opportunity is going to disappear. And then, so there's that. And so you touched on that at the beginning of your story. And then the prayer issue, the right way to pray, so to speak, is to ask for faith and strength and resilience and courage in the face of catastrophe, to set your sights so that you can conduct yourself with a certain amount of nobility, and to ask for the strength to share that with people when they're suffering. And you saw that. You saw that with your father. You were able to unite with him and to see to the bottom of his soul. And there's an old idea that God walks with us when we're suffering, and that Christ on the cross, for example, was simultaneously suffering from all the suffering in the world. And the idea there is that although we're called upon to bear the utter catastrophe of mortality and malevolence, that the spirit that resides at the bottom of being itself is there with us as we suffer. And I believe as a biologist that that's true. And I think the reason for that in part is that if you face what you faced, for example, with your father, then the best part of you is required to emerge, to deal with it. And human beings, we are adapted to our life, terrible as that life is, bounded by mortality and malevolence. If we don't shrink from it, something can emerge within us that can help us bear it gratefully, which is a hell of a thing to ask for in the midst of suffering. And you had that moment of grace where you saw that. And my wife had a similar experience with her son. These things happen, and it's it's the same thing that happened to Moses when he saw to the bottom of the burning bush, for example, and God spoke to him. If you look upon what's most horrifying with absolute intensity, you can see to the bottom of the world. And you had a taste of that. And so, all right, and then the question, what I would say is that you need to compartmentalize and schedule, because you have this weird paradoxical juxtaposition of responsibility and chaos and grief and opportunity. And you need to set up your days so that you have opportunity and time set aside to focus on all of those things. And that way you can keep them straight and bounded and separate. And so you may need time to think about your father and to grieve. You obviously need time to attend to your daughter. You need time to do your creative work. And look, I'm a big fan of scheduling, and most people don't like schedules. They don't like using a Google Calendar, for example, which I use like religiously. And that's because they use a schedule like it's a prison. They write down all the things they have to do. And then they fight against that because they put themselves in, it's like they're their own worst superego. They're their own tyrant. This is the day you have to have. That's not how you use a schedule. The way you use a schedule is that you produce a contract with yourself to have the day you'd really like to have, and to repeat that and think, well, there are a certain number of things I have to do to keep the world in order around me day by day. So I have to schedule those in, because otherwise the chaos mounts, and that's not good.
As a spouse, a parent, or a leader, people count on you. But if you're constantly tired, unfocused, and just not feeling like yourself, how can you show up the way they need you to? That's where Merrick Health comes in. Merrick is a premier health optimization platform that uses comprehensive lab work, not guesswork, to uncover what's really going on in your body. Hormones, thyroid inflammation, nutrient levels, the markers that matter. Their expert clinical teams build a personalized, research-backed plan just for you, whether it's lifestyle changes, supplements, or prescription treatments. When you know what's going on inside, you can lead with clarity, show up with energy, and stay sharp for your family, your team, and yourself. Head over to merrickhealth.com and use code Peterson for 10% off to join their guided optimization program with your personal medical team. That's merrickhealth.com, code Peterson. Stop guessing, start leading, and start with Merrick Health.
And then I want to mix in there a certain amount of leisure so that I get a chance to think and to recover. And I want to lace that with the opportunities that I really want to pursue. And I want to play with that until the balance between that proclivity to order and that proclivity to pursue chaos and opportunity is optimized, so that when I look at my schedule, I think I could do that. And at the end of that, I'll be satisfied that I conducted myself responsibly and I took proper advantage of the day. And so this is particularly true. You're a father now, your responsibilities are multiplying. You have to organize your time intelligently, and there's all sorts of ways to increase the amount of time you have. If you're finding it difficult to find time to do your creative work, get up at 5. It only takes 2 weeks before you're accustomed to that. And then you might have 3 hours in the morning before you have any other responsibilities at all. And pay particular attention in your schedule. This is something people never get right, to the things that repeat every day. Because the things that repeat every day, that's your life. Get those things right. And if you there's no limit to the number of things you do if you use your time wisely, and also if you build a bit of an organization around you and distribute responsibility. And if you're facing too many challenges on the domestic front, maybe you need some help. But assume that you can do it and pursue your opportunities, live up to your responsibilities, but optimize your time utilization and put some help in where you need it. And then play with your schedule until you think, man, if I did all that in the next month, 2 months, 3 months, if I did all that day by day, I'd have the life I'd really like to have. So you can do that.
That seems wise. I think some of the things that helped me when we were going through like hell, you reminded me of this. I set aside like worry-free hours. So literally scheduled, okay, from 5 to 8 p.m. tonight, I'm just not going to think about it. And like, I was like, what disaster is going to befall me in 3 hours if I just don't think about it for a little bit? So that was helpful. I also, just to wrap it up, I don't think you can be a bad prayer. I don't think God cares about that at all. I don't think there's a way to do it. I think it's whatever is in your heart. So I don't think there's such a thing as a bad
that
prayer.
assumes that you're striving upward.
Yeah,
right?
what's in
you
your
can
heart.
strive
Yeah.
upward badly.
Yeah, and is that even badly?
Well, it's badly in that your aim and your ability to improve your aim can continually improve, right? So
Yeah,
you
which
can
it always can.
Well, that's what I mean by badly. But the true goodness in the pursuit of improvement is walking the pathway of improvement. It isn't like, so what you need is you don't have to be somewhere good exactly. And you don't even have to be you certainly don't have to be doing things perfectly. You have to be aiming up, right? And then if you're aiming up and you're walking that pathway up, then that's good. Now, there's still room for improvement, but the thing is, that's part of it being good. You wouldn't want a situation where you had run out of room for improvement because you'd be out of possibility. The worry-free time. There's a cognitive trick that goes along with that. What happens is if you put aside that time and a worry comes up, what you do is you tell yourself, I will worry about that, at the scheduled time. And the alarm part of your brain is the part that produces anxiety. And it's not exactly a cognitive part. It doesn't exactly care what your plan is. What it cares about is that you have a plan. It's like a little kid who's anxious. It wants to know that someone's in control. There's lots of good plans, but a very bad plan is no plan. So if you get worried and you say, I will think exactly about that at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, and you train yourself, that'll work. That'll work, yeah. It's very necessary, especially when all hell is broken loose.
Agreed. I think it took me 6 months after Mom was diagnosed and we were dealing with your health problems, or a year to figure out that I didn't have to solve, first of all, there are unsolvable problems, and then it can just drive you crazy. So I think it took me a year to figure out I could take a break, and that I needed to not worry for at least a little bit each day.
Right.
And you can train it.
That's morally acceptable and necessary, right? Because you can easily feel guilty about
biblical too.
It's like that's a Sabbath,
Well, and God says, don't worry about tomorrow. He full on tells you that, don't worry about tomorrow.
Well, that has something to do with the issue of time frame that we described. So the idea is to orient yourself upward and then to focus on the moment, and then you can adjust the size of the moment. But the idea is that if you intensely focus upward and you pay enough attention to what's right in front of you, the tomorrow will take care of itself. And that's in the best way that it can. That doesn't mean it's not going to be a wavy ride,
Yeah.